Okay, good morning. So we are up to Shin Nun Zayin, making our way through Chelik Daled, the Eruvin. So this simon talks about a small Chatzer. If you've got a small Chatzer which abuts your house, and we're going to talk about pouring water into it, and the concern is that it's going to go from there into the Rishus Harabim, because if it was a larger Chatzer, then it would be absorbed into the flooring of the Chatzer. But because it's a very small Chatzer, then that is the concern. So let's take a look. Says the Machaba, Chatzer shepechusa me'arba amas al arba amas. It's a small Chatzer, less than 4 by 4 amas. Sheismucha l'Rishus Harabim, and next to it, on the other side of your house, is the Rishus Harabim. Ein sheifchin l'soicha mayim b'Shabbos b'mos hachama. You can't pour water into this small Chatzer in the summer months. Shekiven she'ein ba'arba amas, since it hasn't got 4 by 4 amas. Ein sosayim mayim she'adam osel l'shtamish b'chol yom. Chazal estimate that an average person would use 2 saw of water for his daily needs. And it won't, therefore this small Chatzer won't hold that amount. It's ein sosayim mayim she'adam osel l'shtamish b'chol yom roi lebola. It won't be absorbed in that Chatzer. And therefore, it seems that you're pouring from your house into the Chatzer and directly into the Rishus Harabim. So therefore, you've got to sort of dig some sort of pit, some sort of cavity, that it will be able to hold this amount of water. Let's stop there. The Mishnah Berurah gives a bit of a hakdama to this and explains it in more detail. So says the Mishnah Berurah Sifkot and Aleph. So Shin Nun Zayin Sifkot and Aleph. Klal hadvarim hane'emarim b'siman zeukach. The explanation of this simon is as follows: Lefi sheshiru Chazal estimate shekol adam hu tzarich lishtamish b'chol yom sosayim mayim. A person needs to use 2 saw of water, lirchitz bohem ponav yodav v'raglov, to use for daily ablutions, to wash your hand, your face, your legs, your feet, and whatever else you need them for. And we know that on Shabbos you cannot pour from Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Harabim, or into a karmelis. And the way of a person is to pour away the wastewater into his Chatzer, which is close to his house, and it's also Rishus Hayachid, or Moitzi Rishus Hayachid, the Rishus Hayachid, and therefore you're pouring from Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Hayachid. V'shiru Chazal sosayim mayim nivloim bekarka. And Chazal estimate that these 2 saw of water that you would use would be absorbed into the karka of the Chatzer, shel arba amas al arba amas, which is 4 by 4. Ve'enom metanfim akarfa shel Chatzer, and it's not going to sort of make the floor of this Chatzer dirty. If that's the case, and therefore you're not particularly worried if it goes out. And therefore, if it does subsequently spill out into the Rishus Harabim, that was never your intention. And we need that intention. And therefore, it's not as if you were pouring from the Rishus Hayachid to the Rishus Harabim. But that's only true if the Chatzer is of a decent size, at least 4 by 4. But if your Chatzer is small, less than 4 by 4, and therefore the 2 saw of water that you would ordinarily use on a Shabbos are sort of an excessive amount, and therefore they're not going to be absorbed in the ground of the small Chatzer, and therefore it will sully or make the ground of this Chatzer very muddy. And in the summer he will be frustrated by that. Because the person wants his Chatzer to be nice and clean. And now it changes and it becomes nichele, that your water will drain away from the Chatzer into the Rishus Harabim, and your initial machshava has been fulfilled, that you're going from Rishus Hayachid through to Rishus Harabim. And therefore Chazal saw fit to make a gezerah that maybe you will come to pour not into your Chatzer, but actually directly out into the Rishus Harabim. And therefore you need to make some sort of ditch in your small Chatzer which will absorb that amount of water. Because now the water, the extra rounds, will sort of settle in this pit. V'lo yistanef chatzer, and you won't sully your chatzer. V'alkein afilim yotzu lachutz lo yehava k'motzim mishus hayochid l'sharabim, and therefore, even if it does spill out eventually, we're not really worried about that because that was never your concern, because it was going to settle in this guma. Okay, so he said, so the Mechaber said that a chotzer which is small, she's smucha l'sharabim, which is next to a sharabim, ein sheifchin l'seicha mayim b'shabbos mosachamo. You can't pour water into it, because if it's got less than 4x4, it's not going to absorb the sosayim of water that a person normally uses every day, and therefore it's ki'ilu sheifech l'sharabim. Says, which is next to the chotzer. Says Mishnah Berurah Sif Kotzon Beis, she's smucha l'sharabim, la'afuke she's smucha l'karmelis. That would be different if it was next to a carmelis. Like we'll say later on at the end of the sif. Dafka in the summer months. Is more particular about the dirt of his chotzer. And therefore now it's nichele. He's happy that it goes out beyond his chotzer. Okay, back to the Ramah. V'chol guma, 4 lines down, says the Haggah. V'chol guma shehi chatzi amma al chatzi amma berum shleisha chumshei amma machzeke sosayim. How big does this guma have to be to hold this, this sosayim of water? So he says half an amma by half an amma berum shleisha chumshei amma, which is 3/5 of an amma. That will hold the sosayim. If you look at the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotzon Daled, he says, so long as it holds that volume, right? So if you change the dimensions, whether it's the depth or the width of it, the main thing is, of course, that it holds sosayim of water. Okay, back to the Mechaber, 3 lines to the bottom. Wherever you make this guma, it doesn't make a difference. The only thing is that if the guma spills out into the Rosh Hashanah, you've got to cover that parts within the Sarim. Now, if you take a look at everyone's got the Dirshu one? Yeah, if you take a look at picture number 1, he's describing that there. So there's the guy's house, then you've got the Chatzer, and then you've got a guma, which is half in the Chatzer and half out of the Chatzer. So the bit outside of the Chatzer you can see has been sort of covered over. Just we'll see why in a second. So it says the Mechaber again, but yasena b'chutz tzarich lechasos b'nesarim. You've got to sort of cover it up with beams or something. That would render that part outside as a mokum patur. V'yiplu amayim miyodel lemokum patur, and therefore it's going into a mokum patur. V'kivin she'yaseh guma yochel lishbeich kol masher yitzeh. And therefore, since there is that guma, you can throw as much as you want into it. V'meina machzek sosayim, and if it doesn't hold sosayim, then not. Lo yishbeich b'klal, then you can't. Let's just do the Mishnah Berurah till there. Sif Kotzon Hey Bachutz. Hainu b'chotz b'tzat hachotzer. You put it on the edge of the chotzer, like in the diagram. Kadei v'gam kadei shelo yehei takol l'rabim. And not only that, it's a mokum patur. That's what these beams covering up the part which is in the Rosh Hashanah is achieving. But also, otherwise it's very dangerous. Yeah, some unassuming guys are going to walk there and they're going to fall in. Shetei mokum patur. Dalidei kisu mistalik oisa mokum mitash misharabim. Because through that covering, it's no longer fit for use for the rabbim. V'hinei begavna she'tzia ba'agov v'lo b'la kisu gam kein mokum patur. And the truth is, even without the covering, it probably has the status of a mokum patur. Do pachs me'ar ba'alabra, because it's very small, and therefore it will have the definitions of a mokum patur. Ela pen ya'ale oisa karkois ha'uka, but refesh v'tid v'yeh pachs min shleisha tvachim begoiva v'tzibot legaber sharabim. The concern is that mud and dirt might sort of come out of that uka, the cavity, and might be bottled legaber the Rosh Hashanah, and therefore it might have the status of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so you cover it up. Yochel lishbeich, and then you can pour as much as you want into your guma. Va'afilu nismalei me'er Shabbos. Even if it gets filled up in me'er Shabbos, sheifich l'seicha, you can still pour into it. To kimin de midiraisa less isura, and since min haTorah there's no issa, because ultimately you're pouring into your chotzer, you're not pouring into the Rosh Hashanah. Ki im b'sheifich lehedger Rosh Hashanah. That min haTorah, the only problem would be if you pour directly from Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah. Rak shetiknu chomim guma zeichel l'Shabbos. That Chazal were mesakin that in a small chotzer, if you want to pour that amount, you should build a little, dig a little guma that it would hold it. And even if it's a bit full on Erev Shabbos, we're still not worried, because at the end of the day, that's a reminder to you. It's like a heka, and it's going to remind you can't pour from a yochid into a rabbin, directly into the Rosh Hashanah. And since there is that heka, shari, it would be permitted. Umehai time and nami yitir lishbech kol ma sheyirtze afsha agum machzekes rak sosayim, and that's why Chazal allowed you to pour even more, even if the guma can only hold sosayim. Or bevada yasu yetzu anesoron achos, and even though the surplus will therefore definitely spill out, nevertheless v'nichrei bezeh kadei shelo yistalef b'chazer, and the guy is happy about it because his chatzah won't get dirty. Afilu hachi shari b'temikol makom zochu al yedei asiyas aguma v'lo gozru bo, and Chazal weren't goes in that situation. Okay, but if it's very small, if the what's the lashon? If the Machava said but if the gum is so small that it cannot hold the sosayim, that average amount of water the person would ordinarily use on a Shabbos, then lo yishbech bo klal, says the Mishnah Bura, Sifkot and Test, the gozrin and dilma osi lishbech sosayim, do shir tashmish adam liyayin, because that's the shir that a person would use every single day. Okay, let's go back to the Machaba, top line on the next page. V'im yesh b'chotze arba al arba. Now, if, however, the Chatzer does have the dimensions of 4x4, afilu Orach v'katan, even if it's sort of long and narrow, but it's got in total an area of 4x4, 16 square amas, or in any type of Chatzer in the winter months, in the rainy season, then you can pour no problem. To your heart's content, you can pour from your house into the Chatzer if it's a large Chatzer, because then it will be absorbed into the ground, or in the rainy season, because then it's we haven't got the nichele. Says Mishnah Bura Sifkot and Yud, Orach v'katan kagoin, shu Orach shmeina amas v'reichiv shtayim. For example, if it's 8 amas long and 2 amas wide, and mikol makom yesh kan shir levlosayim, so long as it can absorb the sosayim, you're going to be okay. Interestingly, if you look at footnote 5, he says dafka if imritzpas hachur ru'uya libloya. It's got to be that the ground, the material of the ground, can absorb this water. If it's wood or stone or something that cannot absorb, because the whole point is that it's going to absorb the water. But if it's going to be of a material which doesn't absorb, then you can't do it. Okay, in the rainy season, you're less concerned about what your garden looks like, or your chotzer, and therefore you're not, your kavan is not that it should drain away. And if your concern is that there's like a drain that's sort of throwing out water, and other people might see it, but also in the Mishri Gamim and people might come to do that in the summer months as well. We're not worried about that. You'll assume it's just surplus rainwater. You'll assume that it was from the excess rainwater and not because you were pouring out a lot, and you might come to do that in the summer months, which is a problem, etc. We're not worried about that. You can pour as much as you want. Even if you haven't got a guma klal, if you've got a big chotzer, more than 4x4, we don't need the guma, because you can just pour it into your chotzer and it will be absorbed by the larger area. Okay, let's just finish off this sif. We're up to second line of the Machaba, v'chotzer v'achsadra. So you've got a chotzer or an achsadra. What is that? Pirush, bayis sheyesh lo shlosh tefonos. You've got a house with 3 walls, the doifen revius, and the 4th wall shemamidim bodeles, where you normally have the door. Eina megufefes is not enclosed. Kol ikka ela beroch by koshel bayis kula, only on the width of the house. So pa'am she'osim lo amo achas patzim mikan v'amo achas patzim mikan. You put like a sort of a kairo lechiam in there. Kach pirush ha'orach. That's how the Orach understands it. It's a pot. It's a small wall or something. She'ein be'echad mehem levad arba amas. No, it doesn't have 4 amas to it. Mitzdarfin arba amas lahatzil lishbech bohem. It counts towards the 4 amas that you can pour. V'huadin shtei diotios, 2 stories shelifnei shtei aliyos. Aleihem, like 2 projections that come out. V'aleihem maziva sheroi hamayim livloya bohem, and the water can be absorbed there. Imheim sumucha zulazum mitzdarfus. That would also join to the 4 amas by 4 amas that you will need for the water to be absorbed there. Now, when is all of this true? When you've got a chotzer which is next to Rosh Hashanah, Avalim who's smuchel a carmelis, but if on the other side of your house with the chotzer is a carmelis, then afilu hiktana harbe einat tzricha guma afilu b'meisachama, then we're not worried. The whole concern is if on the other side of your chotzer there is Rosh Hashanah and not a carmelis. Okay, says the Mishnah Bura Yud Gimel, shtei diotos, hainu shtei zizin, 2 projections, rechavin, wide projections, neged pischei ha'aliyos, v'reichav kol ziz shtei amas, and each projection is 2 amas wide, ba'erech arba amas neged ha'aliyah, v'ala zizin yesh maziv, and there's some sort of drain on this projection, raka, it's soft and it can absorb the water, and that will do the job. So long as they're next to each other, because then you can pour onto them, and then if they fall onto the Rishrabim, then so be it. Avol karmelis, but if the other side is a karmelis, then there's no problem. Because again, even if there's a Rishrabim there, the whole concern is a gezerah. Dilma osil izrek lehejer Rishrabim. Maybe you'll come to pour from your house, Rishayochid, directly into the Rishrabim. And therefore, Chazal restricted you to pour too much in a small Chatzer, which is next to your house. But if there is a karmelis, well, a karmelis l'shayich there, because dafilu mizrek lehejer, even if you did throw stuff out to the karmelis directly, gam kein leke isur deraisa va'ayin lekaman soif siman zed yesh cholkin. Okay, so just to summarize what we said, that if a person's got a house and he's got a small chotzer next to it, we assume a person uses a sime of water over a Shabbos, and therefore he'll want to pour water out into the chotzer. But if it's a small chotzer, it won't be absorbed in the floor of the chotzer. So Chazal restrict you from doing that, unless you build a little gumma in the chotzer which will absorb the water. And if it's a chotzer which is more than 4 by 4 amas, there's no problem. And if it's b'mosag kashomim, there's also no problem, because we're not worried. It's not nichele if it spills out, because you're happy for it to stay in the chotzer. It doesn't particularly bother you. If it's a larger chotzer, then there's no problem. And also, if on the other side is not a Rosh Hashanah but a Carmelis, again, Chazal will not go there, because even if you did come to do it, you're only doing an Issa Drabon and not an Issa Deraisa, and therefore Chazal will not go there. Okay.